Okay, so yeah, so we had school interface 4. Hopefully you guys were able to complete that. If you guys ran into any challenges, we could definitely try to cover that. But we also had a budget challenge. So this is the one I was hoping to focus on because this is more of a more open-ended class designed solution or challenge. So kind of want to go over this, just make sure we kind of understand just developing class structures and a design that makes sense, even when it's not specified. Like, you know, in this case, again, it's pretty high level in terms of what we're asking for, and then it was your job to kind of design appropriate structures to meet that goal. Do you guys have a preference? Do you guys want to go over school interface 4 or go over the budget challenge, or yield to what I was thinking about?
I would love to go over the budget challenge just because there's a question that I had regarding how to like not repeat myself with the saving of like expenses and incomes. Like I had an idea to like try to like make the logic of save like point at the right file based on what you're passing to it. And yeah, I got hung up there. I'm curious to see how you address that.
Gotcha. Yeah, we can go through this together. I guess I'm not too familiar with that writing out to multiple files, but yeah, let's kind of tackle this challenge. Again, if there's any specific questions on school interface 4, maybe if we have enough time this morning, we can cover it, or we should have a proper stand down today so we can cover that more if needed. But yeah, so I think the budget challenge would be a good challenge to go over for now. So I'm going to progress with that if that's cool with you. I'm going to fork that over. Looks like, yeah, I only see one pull request here. So I see Jack, that was you that attempted it. But yeah, so I think it'd be good to go over as a class. So I forked it. Where did it go? My repositories. Budget. There you are. Okay, so I forked it. Obviously, next thing I want to do is clone it down. So I'm going to copy the URL, clear all this, get to my correct path. And challenges, and we'll do a git clone and budget. Before we start, anyone else that kind of attempted it or kind of looked it over, any initial questions about the budget challenge, or you guys want to just walk through it together?
I started working on it, but I think I got really hung up on like the class structure, and yeah, I kind of struggled with trying to figure out how to organize everything.
Absolutely, yeah. Again, so this is, I think, a great challenge to kind of push your designer mode. Again, there's two general buckets. There's the algo mode where you're going to try to solve a complex problem, and then also designing proper solutions. Because again, you could probably do it in multiple ways. You want to have the best design solution. Sometimes they can be subjective, but usually there's a better path that you could follow. After you write your classes, use this file. All right, so let's runner. All right, let's look at the README. Let's make sure we know what we're doing. So our instructor, John, has a tough time managing his money. He asks us to create a budget app. So instead of using Excel, he wants to use something a little more sophisticated. So yeah, so right now we're not going to be using databases. We're just going to be using CSV files, as we've been doing for the last week or so. So we're going to read and write from a CSV, create single responsibility classes, have these classes interact, and then TDD, again, I'll probably skip over the testing part just because that's less interesting. But yeah, let's talk about designing. So we want to keep track of expenses, and we have categories. So, you know, keep that in mind. That might be something separate when you create. Users should be able to update their monthly income. Okay, so we'll go through these bullet points, make sure we implement these. Usually, again, the TDD way would be to kind of write unit tests for these so that we know that we can have categories, we can have monthly income, monthly costs, but I'm just going to proceed with this challenge here. And then release 1. All right, let's focus on release 0. So that's the designing part. I'm going to copy over our requirements. So I might keep going back and forth. All right, so those are our requirements. Let's kind of think about this. So we need something that's going to be managing our budget on a high level. So I'm thinking I might need a budget class. Not quite sure what it's going to do right now, but it seems like I'll have somebody managing all my expenses. Since we're talking about expenses, I think we should have a class expense. Again, not giving it any functionalities, kind of just thinking about what objects I'll need. Maybe I'll make that transaction, and then it seems like there's gonna be something about categories. So I'm actually gonna create a category class here. Class category. Okay, any other classes you guys can think of that might make sense?
Maybe a interface class, kind of borrowing from the school interface style of how it manages like the menu.
Sure, so we'll have a class, yeah, let's call it interface. All right, so budget class will be the main manager for our budgeting. Pretty straightforward. This would be each individual transaction, debit or credit. So right now I'm planning to use this transaction class both for my monthly income, so that'll be a credit, and then my costs, like if I go to grocery store or go shopping, those will be debits, is the way I'm thinking about this. So again, we maybe separate that out, but I feel like a transaction, positive, negative, they both generally have the same functionality. One just adds, one subtracts, but they're both, I guess, changing our, not income, our bank account category. So type of transactions and interface. So it's going to be our main runner. Okay, so I think these are, yeah, 4 classes. We might need to add more. This is my high level thought. I think these should be good to start off with. So I'm going to start off by creating modules. So again, always get to break these out into separate files. So let's create a budget file. Maybe put a folder here. All classes. What else? We had transaction. And what else? We had category. All right, and as always, if you guys have any questions, please stop me. I kind of just hate going on and on if I'm not sure if I'm losing you guys.
I do kind of have a little bit of a question. So with class interface, right? Like if we initially, that it probably wouldn't be a good idea to initialize like class interface per se as like a child to a base case, right? That might have all that, like, because you don't want the, like, let's say like once the program actually gets developed, you don't want that person to have that kind of access to that, right? Like,
do you mean like having a base class or a parent class?
No, I meant like you wouldn't necessarily want the interface, like you see how you have class interface right there, to be based off of like something that already has all, like you wouldn't want it to be a child to, because I guess I'm going to try to rephrase my question. I was just curious if it was like, if it would be a best practice, since like I feel like an interface would have to be separate from all of that, right? Like you wouldn't want to initialize interface as a child to like budget, right?
Yeah, so when you say child, are we talking about inheritance?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so good question. So yes, this is a question where, or this would be a case where inheritance, I don't think would be proper. And this all goes back to inheritance versus composition. So yeah, so interface theoretically could probably inherit from budget and kind of just use everything that budget has. And it would work probably, but yeah, again, interface is not a type of budget. It's managing a budget object eventually. So good question there. So yeah, this is where we go to a has a, is a. So an interface is going to have a budget object, but it's not a budget object, if that makes sense. Okay, so I put these into separate files just to be proper with our organization. I'm actually going to code up my category class first because this is the easiest. So kind of want to get a quick win here. So if we have categories, we had something like this, a few categories here. So let's add these in. So I'm actually going to just add these in ahead of time. And we can still make this dynamic as we can add more later, but I'm going to add those in right now. So I'm going to create a living item and make that lowercase. So a good question that might come up here is, why am I actually creating this class? Why not just use string? So this is something, again, we don't focus too much throughout the cohort on like proper etiquette. A lot of the times, because like we're just trying to quickly solve challenges, and we're not too focused on the most pristine solution. But this is an opportunity for me to talk about creating defined types and the benefit of that. So again, we could totally use strings. Like if I code this up, let's say I had a transaction, right? So I'm going to create a init method, and that'll be self. All right, always remember your self parameter is your first keyword for instance methods. Self, and this is going to take in, let's say, amount, credit, or debit. So it's going to be either positive, negative amount. And then we're going to have a category, which this is falling under. So question is, why can't I just pass in a string for category? Why did I bother creating this class? Well, there's a couple reasons. One, it kind of creates a predefined menu. So, when you go to like McDonald's, right? You can't just say, hey, I want a bowl of spaghetti, because A, I don't think McDonald's serves spaghetti, and two, you can't just, pick whatever you want. This is like the menu that I'm offering to my application. These are the categories, and these are the only categories I'm going to have. So like, if you get your credit card statement, they have predefined categories. You usually can't just like create your own category saying, yeah, I want a category just for board games I bought, right? It's going to be under leisure probably. So I'm creating like a predefined type here so that anyone using my class or my application that's going to further develop on it, like let's say Kyle and I are working together on this application, he's going to know that these are the categories that exist. And this is often going to be reflected back, like once we start using databases, these types will be in our database. So they're going to have a definition. We don't want to just introduce random new data types that we're not familiar with. Also, this prevents accidents. So now that I have category living, with strings, it's very easy to type, if I was passing in living, what if I made a typo, right? My application is not going to catch that. It's just going to be like, all right, you want a string? Like strings can be anything that you want it to be. Versus having a category class here with predefined types, like I can't make a typo with living here, because that's going to be like, hey, there's nothing that's category dot living. Does that make sense? So living versus category dot living with a typo. If I try to use this, my application will be like, hey, I have no idea what that type is if you're trying to read from it. Obviously, you could create this, like if I want to create a new value, this will be totally fine because you can dynamically create new member or class attributes. But in this case, if I were trying to print this out, sorry, I shouldn't be doing this in the init method, but that's where I wound up. Try to print this out, it's just a string, it's going to be fine. If I try to print this out, I'll get an actual error because it's going to be like, hey, this doesn't exist. So it just makes your code safer and easier to understand. So creating data types or predefined data types, definitely an extra step that we don't require, but it's always good to kind of be mindful of just better designing your applications. Any questions on that?
Kind of reminds me of enums in C++.
Absolutely. Yep. Sarah, you got that C++ background. That's my background also. That is exactly what enums would be for. In Python, they don't have a enum type, but this is effectively doing the same thing. Amount equals, all right, so let me quickly code up my classes. So creating some instance attributes, because each transaction will have their own amount. Each instance of transaction will be either a debit or credit. And they'll have a category. Category. Now, one question is, if this is going to be a credit, will there be a category? And that might be, answer might be no. So this might be a reason I might not want to use a general transaction class for both credit and debit. But I'm going to go with this for now. We could obviously change this later. So need to import my module here. So from category. Again, a lot of you guys might have come across this. Visual Studio Code, for whatever reason, has trouble finding modules. So like I get this yellow squiggly line here, but I think I should be importing it correctly. If not, I will have to fix that. But all right, so we have that. I guess I actually don't need this here. My apologies. Okay, so we have class transaction. All right, so for now, I think that's good. Do we need anything else in transaction? No, I'm just gonna keep that as is. Now we have budget. So budget's gonna manage all of our transactions and do some calculations for us. So if we go back to our requirements, so I think we checked out that. Users should be able to update their monthly income. So that's probably something we're setting on the budget class. So maybe add that here. Create a method, set monthly income. Don't forget yourself, and then we'll say income. I guess we could create that right now. So again, init method, a good place to create all your instance attributes, just because they're guaranteed to exist then. So in this case, I'm not sure what budget's going to take in. Maybe it might take an initial income. Okay, so it seems like we could set our monthly income. That was one of the requirements. What else we got? Should know how much the user's monthly costs are, all right? So we'll grab that. And this should return get monthly cost. Yeah, again, so there's some decisions that I'm kind of thinking of. So what is budget actually gonna manage? It's gonna be a list of transactions. So I'm gonna create a self.transactions. This will be a list. And then the question is, how are we gonna do this on a monthly basis? So I don't think the challenge didn't specify how we should be actually tracking all this information. But it seems like, again, if we're going month to month, we might want to have something that could check dates. So if I go back to my transactions, probably need a date here. Self.date equals date. All right, I'm going to get rid of my credit or debit. I think I'm rethinking that, but I'm going to have date here, date there. All right, so you go to the store, over the weekend, you'll have amount you spent. The category would be where you spent it. So where's it? Grocery, leisure, travel, what are the other categories that we have? And then what date we spend on. The reason we want date is so that we can track which month the purchase or the transaction kind of impacts for our budget. All right, so we have transactions, income, return, self.transactions. So that's incomplete. So we want to get it for a particular month. So let's test in a month. Okay, kind of thinking here, maybe I want to add a month class. It'd be similar to my category class. Again, if I'm going too fast or any questions, please ask. Let's do Jan equals 0. I guess we probably want a year, but let's just make this a budget for our year. I don't want to go too deep into the weeds. So let's do Feb equals 1, March equals 2, and so on. August, then we have September, October, November, and December. All right, so it's creating another user-defined type so that I have predefined values, and I'll use that as my month here. So let's just make this a month. Keep it simpler. All right, going back to my budget. So we need to get monthly costs. The user of my class will pass in a month value, and then I'll return all the transactions, or sum up all the transactions for that month. So we'll do for transaction in all of our transactions if self.transactions.month. Again, just matching that month to month there. If that's equal, then I want to add to my total. So monthly total plus equals self.transaction.amount. Okay, so again, I'm using that transactions object. So sorry, this should be TXN, my bad. Because we're looping over all of our transactions, and this should be transaction also. Monthly total, we need to create that, so we'll just put that out here. All right, is this making sense, what we're doing here? We're gonna have a list of transactions. I chose just to have a month instead of a date. We could easily put a date in there, but I just wanna track by month. So loop over all of our transactions. If it matches the month that we're looking for, then add it to our total. And then finally, return monthly costs. All right, so that's how much money we spent for this particular month. Okay, let's go back to our requirements. I think that more or less should be accomplished. It should be able to create and calculate new expenses. So I think that's something where we'd have, if we go back to our budget class, we want to add transaction. And then what else? Should be able to tell users what % of their monthly income is being spent in each category. All right, so again, I think we accomplished this. We want to do more, but did I copy that properly? Okay, we have the ability to add transactions, and then I think the last thing that we need to check off here is probably the hardest part, is calculating % by category. So let's get a volunteer here, or a voluntold. I have Tim Gaston. Could you kind of assist me here? Kind of what do you think this algorithm is going to look like, where we want to figure out what % of their monthly income is being spent in each category? So let's say % report. Do you have any ideas how we go about doing this? All right,
Not particularly.
All right, that's cool. Again, I know I've been kind of coding kind of quickly, so just kind of go over a part. So we have categories. So in this case, we have 5 defined categories. Again, if we want to add more, we totally can. But using these 5, we want to break up all of our transactions that has a category member here. So we want to break it down by categories. So basically create 5 buckets, or as many buckets as we have categories. And then we want to determine the percentage based on our total spent. So kind of think about my category structure here. I'm not sure if it's the best because there's no way to loop over these that I can think of. So how can we make this better?
Can you convert it to a dictionary?
Yeah, I was thinking about using a dictionary. That's what was on my mind. So if we have a dictionary, we could sort of iterate through it. So we said
also make it 2 separate arrays and then loop through the indexes.
So, sorry, whose suggestion was that?
That was me, Andrew.
Andrew, sorry. Yeah, my slides don't always show it. So Andrew, that's an interesting suggestion. So this is something I noticed from assessment 1 and something I did want to talk about at some point. So I think Andrew's suggestion was something like have a list of values here. And then maybe have another one. Something like this.
Yeah.
All right, so again, sorry, I didn't code this up really the best way, but the idea here is to have like maybe living, and then this would be
The count, so 0 for that or wherever it's starting at.
Gotcha. Yeah. So, you know, if we're summing this up and basically like, let's say we spent 0 in the living category and food, maybe we spent, you know, $500, maybe that's a lot, but $400 in a month and so forth. So this would work, but this goes back to our design considerations. So in this case, we're having synced lists, which again, like we're just gonna map index 1 to this value. So both these indices are lining up. But the problem is, what if I add a new value here? Let's say I had fun. I don't think that's a proper category, but if I had fun here, well, now these are out of sync, right? Obviously, I should be appending instead of inserting at the front. But again, the core issue here is that these two rely on each other, but there's nothing in your application that is purposely or forcing them to be tied together, if that makes sense. So I would say I saw this on the assessment. So definitely not a rare or not a unique. Yeah, it's not a bad way to solve it. It's just, again, it makes your code inflexible. For example, if I need to add a new category here, well, now I got to update 2 lists instead of just 1. So you should think about tying this data together, again, using a dictionary or something else. Like you maybe just have pairs here, like you could have a list and have a value here. Maybe not the cleanest solution, but this ties it together so that if I add a new value, I'm going to add a new corresponding sum to it also. Rather than having 2 separate lists in this way that kind of mirror each other, it's easy for those lists to get out of order in case someone else is adding more data or who knows what's going on in your application. So having multiple synced lists, especially if you get beyond 2, it can become easy to kind of screw one up, especially if your data is kind of dynamic. So definitely a good suggestion there. Definitely would work. But when we go back to like, is that the best design? I would argue usually it's not the best design, again, to have parallel lists or synced lists because it's easy to kind of, screw one of those lists up and then your applications kind of go haywire and might be kind of hard to track down. But yeah, I think dictionary is a good way because it ties sorry, what am I doing here? Let's say values. Yeah, dictionary is a good way to kind of tie items together. So in this case, I'll have, how do I want to do this? So I don't want to use strings again. So I'm going to actually keep this here. And then kits. Let's call that get categories. So again, I'm trying to avoid using strings here. I want these to be fixed, and I want strings are, again, they're easy to use as a developer. Like they're quick and dirty in terms of just getting something to work. But again, they're not the best data types to use in most cases. So get categories is going to be, let's call it a class method. And this was to return a dictionary. So yeah, I'm still kind of struggling how to do this properly. So if I have these types, I want to create something that's returned that I could iterate over. I'm going to pass on that for now. I'm going to let that churn in my mind. But so percent report, let's get back to here. So in this case, we need a sum. So we have a method that gets our monthly costs. So I think we should be using that. So I'm going to say total. Say this takes in the month equals self get monthly cost. I'll take in a month value. And then we need to figure out how much we spend in each category. So probably need something similar to this. Get all right, I'm going to change my mind. I'm going to add a new parameter here, call it category. And default will be none. So if they pass in none, that just means we want to check all categories. If they pass in a category, we'll return the total from that category. Is this the best way to do it? No, I guess that won't be efficient either. Sorry, I'm still kind of piecing this together. So we could do this, but then we're going to call this function each time for each category. That's going to loop over all of our data over and over. So that's not the most efficient solution. So maybe we could do better here.
So when that happens, it would just utilize too much, right?
Yeah, it would work again. It's just, I was thinking there's probably an easier way to do this, as in where we iterate over once and
Just basically making it more efficient is what you mean, for sure.
Yep.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
per category. So this will be similar, but this will return some other data structure. So if I do this, and then I'm going to return, still kind of struggling here. Let's go to the Googles. Let's see what Google's recommends. So Python using enum list. So enum stands for enumeration. In other languages, as Sarah mentioned, like in C++, there is a way to do it. Looks like there might be a way to do it here too. So modules defined. All right, so there's an enum class. Maybe this might be what I want. So I use import enum, have values.
So is this intended to be an example of why we don't code before we design the system?
Yeah, I always get to know what tools you have. So I obviously didn't look into Python close enough. So there's this enum object that I could use. So it looks like I'm going to use some inheritance there. My main goal is to create values that aren't strings that I can iterate over. So, okay, looks like this will achieve it. So again, just to go over what I'm doing here. I'm using, I just did a quick Google. There's support for enumerations in Python. So to use an enumeration, you need to import enum first. So I'm going to do that. Let's go to our category class. Then we inherit. So we talked about inheritance. Basically, enum is a class that has various properties in it. We're going to extend it, or basically inherit from enum, and create a category enumeration. Let's follow their naming syntax, because these are constants. So we want to capitalize them. Obviously, I should be following good practices there. So saving and leisure. All right, cool. So now we have these values. It looks like we can just iterate over all those values. So we just have a shake class. In this example, we have vanilla, chocolate, cookies, and mint. And we're able to iterate over that. And this functionality comes from our enum class that we're inheriting from. Normally, you wouldn't be able to just iterate over a class like this. All right, so that.
Quick question on that. Just for the how you were talking about earlier, trying to figure out a best practice for it, or making it run a little bit quicker. Just for visual purposes, when you import the enum class from the other library, you're kind of giving up. I mean, you're using someone else's code, so you don't really know how functional it is, correct?
Yeah. So I'm using something that's built in the Python, so I would need to read documentation. I am using, I guess, someone else's class, but enum is like a generic enough type. It's kind of like using a list, right? In Python, list is predefined. You can create your own implementation of list, but list is like just a common data structure that Python just built it for us. Versus like, this class I'm creating for month, or more specifically like budget. Like obviously Python's not going to have a budget class that it's built in. Like someone else may have created it. I could look on the web and maybe find like a budget library that someone developed. But like this is specialized. It's a user-defined type versus enum. Enum is just, again, a common enough design object that Python just created for us. So yes, I am using something like someone else's code, which is in this case like the Python library. But like the functionality in here, again, just know more about enums. It's pretty basic. It's just kind of giving you values that you can define and then iterate over. If I actually dive into here, it's probably going to look pretty gross, but Yeah. So implementation, there's a lot to it, but effectively it just allows you to create values and iterate over them without having to go through too much trouble. All right, so without this enum, I can still create my class, but I wouldn't be able to iterate over these values very easily. So that's why I'm using this enum
Will
class.
we be able to reference each of these values individually?
Pardon?
Will we be able to reference like category.food?
Yep. Yeah, yeah. These are class attributes. So yeah, we should be able to do category.food. If you look at our example here, they're doing color.red. I guess they switched examples here, but in this case, they create a color enumeration where we have red, green, and blue. So these are predefined values so that a developer can't just create a color. These are the fixed colors that we're offering. Again, you might want to make it dynamic, but usually, you're not going to know how to use like random types that are created dynamically. So that's where we're trying to create predefined values that we can use in our application. So
Is there an important reason why you're changing things to uppercase?
It's just a naming convention. So great question. In Python, there's no real concept of constant values. So if you remember in JavaScript, there's a let keyword and a const keyword. That's in JavaScript. So JS constant value can't be changed, right? So, sorry, I'm kind of just writing gibberish here, but there's these keywords in JavaScript. Const says, hey, I'm creating this value that I don't want to be changed. So like if I want to create a representation of pi, mathematical pi, I would create like a 3.14159, whatever the digits are, and make that a const value because that's not supposed to change. In Python, there's no concept of constant values. So by convention, again, everyone just kind of agreed to using this naming paradigm where if you make something capitalized, all caps, that's going to indicate that these values are meant to be constant. So you're not supposed to change it. You can still change it in Python. I could still do category.living and make that equal to like 88. Nothing's going to really stop me here. Python, again, is really lax with that kind of stuff. So just knowing something as caps is going to say, anyone reading this code should be like, hey, wait, this should be a constant based on my knowledge of naming conventions. Why are you assigning a new value to a constant? And that should raise like some yellow flags or orange flags or red flags, whatever color flag you want to indicate. Yeah, so great question there. I made them all caps because that's just the naming convention that all Python developers try to follow for constant values. So these values are not going to change.
Ankur?
Yep.
Would you mind going back to budget.py? I'm typing as you're typing just so I can follow along.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. That works.
But yeah, again, I'm not going to expect you guys to follow along as we're coding in this example because it's going to be kind of hard to follow. But we'll put up the recording obviously, so if you guys need to, stop and rewatch any portions, should have that option too. So sorry, let me just quickly go through this to clean it up, and then we should get back to our main challenge.
Ankur, I do also have another question. You went to Go definition when you highlighted enum to kind of look under the hood, right? Yep. Okay, no worries. Thank you.
I do that often. Usually, like the Python files are kind of hard to read, but yeah, I go to definition and let you peek at what you're actually using. So again, it's usually easier to read documentation online than kind of follow the code yourself because the code, again, for me, it's kind of hard to parse it all. But yeah, you always have the option to kind of dive into Python code and see what's going on under the hood. Should you want to know particulars. All right, so clean that up. So the whole point of that was so I could iterate over my categories. So let's get my categories here. So for cat in category dot, how do they do that? They just did, I think, yep, shake and ship. So simple enough for category and category. So I'm going to need to import this, and I guess they did it for me. For cat in category, we need to sum up values. So let's create a, what do you want to do here? Dictionary. All right, so I'm initializing my dictionary using the categories that we created. And then I want to go through all my transactions and based on the category. So we'll go category costs, transaction.category, and we'll append to that. So that'll be transaction.amount. All right, so this function is going to break it down into individual categories. I guess technically I probably could avoid calling this function because I'm going to have the total in here anyway. But I'll keep it simple for now. So we have total costs, and then we have category. Do we need a month in there? It looks like we still have a month. Okay, that should be good. All right, so we have two functions. One just gives us a total for the month. The other breaks down by category, and we just want to return a percentage. So now that we have each, we should be able to compute percentages pretty easily. So let's do for, I guess, category costs. Let's create percents. Category costs will be a new dictionary. Yep. And then for that, and all right, so we're going to iterate over our category costs and just add a new entry to percent category costs and make that category percents. It should be able to tell users. All right, so category cost equals sorry, let me get more space here. So category cost contains our totals for each category, and then we want to divide that by the total cost. So that should give us a percent for each category. And okay, and then we want to return category percent cost. All right, so obviously we should be testing this.
You multiply that by 100?
Yeah, I guess if we want percentage, fair point. Let's do 100 times. I guess, yeah, if we want percentages, makes sense to multiply by 100. Good call there. All right, so I coded all this stuff up. I should be testing each item probably step by step, but I kind of went all in, just kind of speed the things up. All right, so we created our budget class, a couple data types, which are category and month, and then a transaction class, which is pretty bare bones right now. We'll see if we need to add more to it. All right, last thing I want to do is create my interface class. So we'll just create it in my runner file. Or maybe, nah, we'll create interface. Move that into there. All right, so this is our main execution. So let's define this. So and let's just print out options. So over our task again, we want to see total monthly expense. what else do we need to do? We need to see costs by category, percent. Might need to rename these later. What else do we have? We have ability to add transactions. So 3 add transaction. And then what else? What do we have in there? So we have get total costs, percent category, add transactions, set monthly income. So that's what we need to do. All right, let's go with those 4. So that's going to be printed out, and then I'm going to get user input. Input. All right, so we're going to want ints from there. All right, so they're going to choose from this, and they should be able to do one of the others. So let's do a new function, self dot take. What's the best way to design this? Do if option. Okay, so if option equals 1, we want to set total monthly expense. So we need to grab another input from the user. We're just going to trust the user. They're not going to set some garbage, but who knows? Select option. All right, we'll do if option equals 2. Oh, sorry, I am all over the place here. Expenses. Okay, so I'm kind of getting, kind of getting messy here. I think it's time for a break because I feel like I need a break here. Let's take a 8-minute break. So be back at 9:35, and we'll kind of complete this once I have my mind settled here. All right, so yeah, see you guys in a few minutes.
No worries, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. It's been a
And all right, cool. So just to review what we've done, we've created our budget class, which has most of the functionality, if not all. Obviously, we still need to test it, so that's something that remains. But we've created our base classes that we need for this challenge, and now we're just trying to implement the runner file, the interface where the user can interact with it. So yep, so we're just gonna create a run method, have a while loop that runs until they exit. So I think that's one of the options I probably want to put out here. Let's put quit. So that'd be case number 5. And that should break this loop. So again, break will just terminate this while loop, and then we'll have nothing else to do after that. So that's our quit. Let's take this one by one. So this is where I'm going to test incrementally. I don't want to implement everything at once. So I'm just going to do, let's do total monthly expenses. All right, for that, we're going to need to use our budget class, right? So our budget class has the ability to set, to get monthly costs right here. So let's create a budget item. So if we do def init, again, our initialization method, and we need to create an instance attribute, and that's going to be a budget object. So let's create a new one here. We're going to need to import that module. So we'll do from modules.budget, import our budget class. So we're going to create a brand new budget here. So I don't think we need to pass a default income. We're just going to say income can be 0. Maybe let's make that more clear. All right, so initially our income is going to be 0, so they have to call set monthly income if they want to have that data in there. All right, so we have our interface, creates an empty budget object, and then over here, option 1, which is see monthly total expenses, we want to call our budget object, so it's going to be self.budget. Again, remember, we can use budget from this method in our run method because we're passing the self as I guess self gets passed automatically. So we do budget, and then we want to call get monthly costs and print that out to the console. Simple enough. All right, so let's actually test that out. So I want to make sure I coded up everything correctly. I likely have errors because I don't think anyone codes everything perfectly the first time. But yeah, let's get this run. So my runner file, I'm going to import modules.interface, import interface. Maybe I should name this a little better, but all right. So we're going to create an let's say just call it runner equals interface, and then the runner, and I'm not happy with that name, call it budget interface. And with that, we need to call run. All right, so this will be our main execution point here. Let's see if this works. I am doubtful that I've coded everything correctly, so we'll debug if we need to. But all right, let's get this run. So I'm going to do Python runner. All right, so we got our menu. That looks good. Select an option. So I haven't added any error checking here. So that's, again, something always to be mindful of. Once you code your initial solution, make sure, like, you know, if I enter a 6 here, well, right now my application is not going to do anything sensible. It's going to print the menu, if I'm correct. Yeah, so we get the menu again. Maybe we want a better, like, you know, user prompt saying, hey, you need to enter a value between 1 and 5. But for now, I'm just going to go with assuming the user is not malicious or, you know, understands input. So let's do option 1. We got a bound method. Yeah, so we did not get what we want because I forgot to put my parentheses here. So here, I'm actually printing out the function. I'm not actually calling the function. I'm just printing out the function. And as you see, it shows me like the address for the budget objects. Not really useful. So don't forget your parentheses here. So you need to actually invoke your function by using the parentheses. So if I make that change and relaunch, so let's click this with Control C. Okay, hit 1, and we got an error. So missing 1 required positional argument. Yep, that makes sense. So if you look at our get monthly costs in our budget class, we need to pass it a month, right? Because the design decision that we made, or that I made, was that we're going to break this out by months. So our budget object can store multiple transactions across multiple months. We want to get the monthly cost for a particular month. So we created a month data type where we have these months defined. So let's figure out for May. So we completed May. So I want to look at my credit card statement. So let's pass it that value. So I'm going to have to import something else from modules.month, import my month class that I created. So wrong place, my bad. That should go in our interface. So we need to input from the user. Enter month. Again, I'm going to assume that user knows the format, but in this case, like, it's not going to be clear that you need to enter a value 0 through 11. Like, we could probably put that in here. But again, they might not know. They might try to type in January. So definitely can make this, I guess, more user-friendly by error checking and having better prompts. But in the interest of time, I'm just going to go with assuming the user knows what they're doing. So let's get month value. and pass in a month. Okay, so, all right, let's give this a go again. So I'm gonna clear this, run my Python file. All right, see total and monthly expenses. All right, we get a prompt, that makes sense because we need to figure out what month. So what month I wanna do? May. So May is value 4, so let's enter 4. Okay, so we get a value of 0. Again, not the easiest to see, so I probably wanna break this out, a little better. Maybe add some new lines at the bottom. So we do print, add some dividers. Always get to have some visual breaks. All right, so we got 0. Why did we get 0? Well, anyone know why we're getting 0 here?
Because you have no transaction amount to work with.
Yep, yeah, so according to my budget class, we made no transactions in the month of May, which would be awesome if I could just spend 0 a month and still get by, that'd be great. But nope, we gotta pay for stuff like groceries and other items. So yeah, let's add some transactions just for our purposes. So let's actually implement the add transaction ability. So that was option 3. We'll get back to option 1, kind of jumping around here. So if option equal 3, let's just prompt the user for a bunch of information. So let's say amount. We're just going to use int. We'll assume that's rounded to the nearest dollar. So let's say enter amount spent. What else do we have? We have enter category. And then we have, what was the last thing? We had month, right? So you gotta specify what month they made that purchase in. Enter month. All right, so we have those 3 items that we create a transaction object. So I need to import that also from modules.transaction import transaction. All right, so again, these are individual objects. We broke it down into sensible objects that exist in the real world. So now that I have amount, category, month, I should be able to create a transaction. So we'll call it TXN equals a transaction object, and that takes in amounts. So we have amount, category, and month. All right, so it's all packaged into our transaction. Last thing we need to do is call our budget object. So that's self.budget, and there's an add transaction method. Excellent. VS Code makes it very easy to find these, find appropriate methods. Add the transaction there. All right, so now we could add transactions. Let's test that out. Let's quit our application. All right, so we're gonna do option 3 this time. So if I do Python runner, we wanna add a transaction, which is option 3, which hopefully should be hit right here. It should be else if. All right, I don't think that changed the matter right now, but 3, enter amount spent. So Jack, you wanna give me a transaction you made recently or made up or real, either way?
Sure, a wall mount for a TV for $50.
Gotcha, $50. I guess we could also probably have a name for our transaction just to have more descriptions. So that'd be something I want to add.
That was oddly specific.
Pardon?
Nothing.
Okay. Yeah, so $50 for a wall mount for his TV. Category, we'll say that's a leisure spending. What categories do we have? It could be living, I guess. So I'll put that in living. I shouldn't be typing in a string anyway. What did I do there? All right, so we don't want to use strings. We're using these categories. So again, we probably want to provide a better user interface, like list out the values they can enter. But right now, I haven't really made this user friendly. Category 1, and then month would be, we're assuming that Jack spent it in May or bought it in May. So we'll do month 4, which was May. All right, so we add this transaction. Probably be good to add some prompts. So I'm just going to kind of update my code as I go, so I'm not debugging it. We could make use of a try. Something we haven't used often, but again, something could go wrong in add transactions. So if there's an except, we'd print out error adding transaction. Else, well, we can just say transaction added. All right, so good to have safe code. So who knows if add transaction that may throw an exception. We don't actually know the implementation from our perspective of interface, right? Like let's say Stephen worked on the budget class and I'm working on interface class. I don't need to know what add transaction does, but I also don't know if it can throw an exception or not. So always good to be safer than sorry. Again, that could be true with all the methods you're calling, but in this case, I just want to know if it succeeded or not. So I want to print useful messages in either case. Okay, and then what else do we want to do? Right, so again, I updated my code, but I still am running down here. So I want to see my total monthly expenses. So we only have one transaction right now. So I think our expense should be $50, but let's actually verify that. So if I hit 1, what month? Month of May, which was value 4. Notice we got 50 up here. Again, not easiest to see. I probably need more new lines, but looks like that's working correctly. So let's kind of clean up my code a little bit, just so I can read this. So let's do cost. Let's store that value. Let's do another try except else, just in case anything can go wrong. Always good to be protected. So I have costs, and I want to print. I don't need an else in this case. Probably don't need else down here. Okay, so print you spent costs dollars. All right, so I'm actually kind of rethinking my choices. Again, kind of coding on the fly, but for my month, again, it's not the best because I don't have a way to kind of print out the actual month. So I probably want to tie my enum with a string so that I could actually display a string. There's various ways I could go about it. I guess one way would be have a class attribute. There might be a better enum way to do this, but I'm just going to go with what I know right now. So class method, and this will be get month name. And this would take in CLS, I guess in this case, be a static method. And this just takes in month name, or month value.
Keyword.
What was that?
Don't you have to write def to create a new method?
Absolutely. Great catch. So get month name, or return if. This is where I want to use a switch statement. I think someone posted, was it Sarah? Someone posted that switch statements will be available in Python 3.10, but I don't have that ability right now, so I'll just do it the hard way. Let's just do if month equal month of May, return May. All right, I'm going to be lazy right now. I'm just going to deal with May. I should code up all 12 months, but you guys kind of get it, hopefully. So I have that, so I can use that here. I call month, get month name, and we have a month value already. Yep. All right, so we're getting some more user-friendly output. Always good to have that.
Curly bracket on that anchor.
Yep. Thank you. Okay, so we'll print out what they spent. Let's test out our changes. So again, we added the ability to add transactions and the ability to see costs. So let's actually see that at play. Let's get out of here. All right, run this again. F string, screw something up.
You have an exclamation point in there. And your
yeah, they're curly braces, just loft. There you go.
Thank you guys. Okay, so let's add some transactions. So amount spent, let's keep the same one. Category was living. Okay, that was category 1. Let's forget. Yeah, 1. Enter month 4. Who else we got out here? Reno, can you give me a random expense, either real or fake?
$120 food.
All right. Oops. We want to add another transaction. Amount spent, $120. Category food. I shouldn't have to keep looking this up. All right. 2. And month also May. And then let's add one more transaction. So who else we got out here? Sean, you're at the edge of the screen here. Sean, can you give me a random expense?
Let's say another $50 for food for eating it.
Okay, food. Oops, category is wrong. That's going to screw me up royally. That's where error checking would be good. Let's add that to some random month. Sorry, let's try that again. So we spent 120, category food, and let's say that was spent in January, so the first month of the year. All right, so we added 4 transactions. I screwed up one of them because I added category 50, which doesn't exist. This is where error checking would come into play, but that one's kind of just a garbage transaction. So we have essentially 3 transactions. 2 of them were made in May, so we had $120 in May and $50 in May, somewhere up here. So I would think that our budget or our total for May should be 170, like mentally just doing that math. So hopefully if our budget calculations are doing it correctly, it's only calculating for the month that I specify, which I think is correct, but I also want to verify it. Let's go back to see total monthly expenses. Month of May, I spent $170. That seems correct. Oops, none. That's not good. Why am I getting none? So get month name.
You didn't put in all the months.
Yeah, but I feel like May should work. So month here. That might be require some debugging. So month, get month name. Yeah, let's actually debug this. I don't like we have enough time for that. So add a breakpoint, run this through the debugger. Let me kill my application down here.
Couldn't you use your enumeration here to go through them and find out the month name?
Sorry, Don, I didn't quite hear you there.
Couldn't you use the enumeration of months to find out the month name?
I don't have a month name stored anywhere. So this is where my function here would give me the actual month name. This is a variable, so that this doesn't have a string representation. This is just the variable name with a variable value. So I do need like probably a better design here. So again, this is probably not the best approach here. But there should be a way to tie a string to my values here. So maybe I can make this like a dictionary and have like, a value and a name embedded in there. Or, having a getter function that works too. Not sure why this isn't working, so let's debug it. Let's give it a run. I want to run my interface.
Ankur, just a quick question.
Go for it.
If we did convert that to a dictionary, right? Wouldn't the key be initialized as a string? If we use the if we tried to access the keys that ways, and like maybe I'm sorry, I was just thinking.
No, sorry, I didn't quite catch the question there, but I was saying we have something like each value was like value and then name, so we could have something like that. Right, so we do something like that, so everything's tied together. The thing I hate though is like introducing strings in this manner. So that's why I like JavaScript and that you could have names there instead of just strings. But I'm just gonna keep this like that. What's going on here? So no module name modules. That's interesting. Why would that be an issue here? I got rid of this, but that works.
Since they're in the same, you have to do the modules dot budget, or can you just say from budget import budget?
Good question. I guess we're about to find out. Yeah, it's not having a good day here. Let me try to cheat my way out of here. Does that work? Sorry, I didn't think I'd run into this issue. I thought this was a different. All right, stop that. Let's try running this again.
You might be having a problem because you're running it from interface. I think you might need to hit it from.
From runner. Yeah, that might make sense. Still, I think that you will run from there, but yeah, you're right. Sorry, I should be running from runner. Thank you for that assist. Yep, that makes sense. All right, thank you. All right, so we have our application running here. Select the option. Let's add some transactions quickly. So we spent $50. Category 1, enter month 4, and then transaction got added, so that's good. We'll do a couple more transactions. So we spent 120 on food in month May, and then one more transaction. Let's say we spent $500 on travel. What is travel? That is 3. We spent $500 in travel. Let's say we went on a trip in January, so that's month 0. Okay, and then I wanted to debug my month here, why this value wasn't correct. So let's DC total monthly expenses, enter month of May. All right, so we hit our breakpoint, and let's investigate our values. So month is 4, that looks correct. Month of May looks like 4. All right. I'm not sure what even happened there. Okay, I'm gonna need to do that again. Okay, so month is value 4, and month.May, again, it has a value of 4. Interesting. So notice that enumerations give you a value and a name. So maybe this was what Don was hinting at, but looks like I'm getting another goodie from this enum class where I don't need to create this function. It looks like May already has a value and name pairing. So that's something I was going to create with my dictionary that I was imagining before, but it looks like enumerations do that for me anyway. So I think that's even better. So let's get rid of this static method, discovering new goodies along the way. So it looks like I could just do month.name right here. And this name parameter, again, is coming from my enum class. It's not something I've created, right? There's nothing .name here, but that's coming from enum, it looks like. So I should be able to do jan.name, and that should give me that representation in string. So that's kind of useful. Again, enumerations are really nice to use, especially make your data a little more secure. So let's trash that and run this console. I gotta add my transactions again, don't I? So do this quickly. 50, 1, 4, 120. Category was 2, 4, and then one more. Amount spent 500. Categories travel. Month was January. All right, let's list our monthly expenses. Month of May. What happened here? Error adding transaction. Oops. All right, looks like month.name didn't quite do what I want to do. So, all right. That's
Ankur, don't you need to get rid of that method call there and just reference month.name?
Yes, you are right. So month is going to be an integer. How do I convert it to enum? So it's going to be some research. Sorry for the detours here, but I think I should be able to do it. So convert number to enum, Python. Great, Stack Overflow. So it looks like I just pass in a value. Yep, simple enough.
If you go for month.value, isn't it going to return the value, the name?
So here, month is just an integer. It has no concept of enumeration, so you need to convert it to enum by passing it to the enum class. Again, this is just from documentation, so I'm kind of learning on the fly also. but we're taking an integer, we're passing it into our enum class so that we can access the name in this manner. So if I did that correctly, I'm gonna have to restart. 3. You get to have kind of a seed file here. The month. Let's do that one more time. 3, amount spent 120, 2, 4, 3, 500. We traveled in the month of January. Okay, let's try this one more time. Fingers crossed. Third time. All right, there we go. So we spent $170 in May. So again, I know I'm kind of going over this quickly. This enum class, definitely a good read on your own, kind of understand what's going on there. But it's just a pre-built Python class that gives you functionality. As we saw, like I just learned here that I could just use .name. I don't know how to create my own method to rename it. So whatever I name my variables, it kind of converts that to a string, which is awesome. All right, so it looks like that's working correctly because we had 2 transactions in May. We also had one in January, so let's check that out. We traveled, so it should be $500, right? Yep, we spent $500 in January. Cool. All right, so I think, again, we probably want more testing, but it looks like monthly total expenses looks good. Transaction looks good. Let's do see cost by category %. So we need to implement that. Unfortunately, I'm gonna have to kill my app again. But we're getting to the finish line. I feel like I've been talking a lot and coding a lot. Definitely want to pause for questions. So what questions do you guys have? Any comments, any thoughts, any questions about design decisions that we made along the way? I want to make sure that everyone is.
Yeah, I've got a question. So for some of the classes, would it make sense to, like, when looking at refactoring, if say category.py has just like a few lines, month.py has a few lines, transactions.py has a few lines, would you be able to refactor it as like, or would it make sense to refactor it as like one class with all the variables that you're going to use, or would you prefer to have more classes, just like on a functionality standpoint?
Great question. Again, I would highly recommend breaking it down to smaller units. So again, I could add values here, like I could have living as 13. I'm not sure if this is quite what you're suggesting, but you could have all your definitions in one object. But there's two things to that. One, you can't reuse numeric values, so it's just going to be a long list of numbers. And 2, you don't want to combine different data types because it's just, from an organizational standpoint, if I want to reuse this month object in like some other program, I don't want like miscellaneous data in here. Like if I have living as a category, right? And then let's say I want to create a calendar app that's going to reuse this, these data types, or at least these right here. Then this living one is just like extraneous data that kind of could confuse the developer. So always good to just break it apart as much as you can. Again, might be kind of tedious and might kind of seem kind of silly. Like look at my transaction class, it's pretty minimal. Category, pretty simple. But again, this is proper design practices, as in breaking it apart into smaller reusable modules, so that, again, if I want to reuse category, only thing I'm reusing is category. Again, the other way it would work, like I could have like a giant file that has like every infinite, description and category that I want, but it's not going to be, again, easy to kind of use whichever pieces that I just want. I'm going to inherit everything, and again, not usually recommended from a design standpoint. But excellent questions you guys are asking. But yeah, so I think, again, even as simple as this transaction class is, having this bundle up in here and nothing else, I think is the better design decision here. Okay, so we got 1, 3, and 5. I think we have 2 more to do, and then hopefully we can wrap this up soon. So we want to set monthly income and then category %. I think I might have misread something, so I want to go back to my README file. Budget. Okay. I guess I'm not sure how monthly income's used. Maybe that's in release 1. Anyone that kind of read this, is the income used anywhere? Anyone know?
I don't think so. It's a budget app, so like they add in the design doc, but I don't think you actually do anything with it as specified. Although, yeah, if it's an actual budget thing, you probably would.
Gotcha. Yeah. So maybe we could add some functionality, like if they try to add a transaction that exceeds their monthly income for that month, then we might want to yell at them. So let's just quickly implement that. So we use income. So if and not super efficient, we'll do costs, monthly costs. Looks like month doesn't appear. All right, so this is per category. You want to do it by month. So let's get a new method in here. This is begging for a refactor because it looks like there's a lot of similar code going on here. But for now, I just want to get this going. So monthly costs, not used here. We want to loop over. Oh, sorry, here we have that method. Not sure what I'm thinking right now. Okay, so get monthly costs. So that's going to be self.get monthly cost. We got to pass it a month. So that'll be transactions month. So each transaction has a month associated with it. It's going to use the month based on that transaction to see the monthly cost for the current month. Now, if let's say monthly cost plus the transaction amount that we're about to spend is greater than self.income, then we should probably have some alert. So let's just say, in this case, let's print you don't. Let's just assume that we don't have savings, so you don't have enough money. I'm going to yell at the user so they see it's an error. And let's say we want to throw in this case. So, or sorry, raise. So raise. I don't think we've talked about this keyword. That's how you can create your own errors. So that works in conjunction with these try catch. So try is going to try to execute everything in that try block. If an exception is raised, then this except block will take over. So that's what the raise keyword does. You can raise an exception. So I'm not quite sure, but can I just throw a string error? All right, so in that case, we're not going to actually append or add our transaction. Everyone cool with that? So we should set income for our month. Add transaction. What else were we doing here? So we did this. We changed it. We did that. We want to do set monthly income. So that one should be easy to do. Let's sneak that in there. So elif option equals 5. We want to call budget. Sorry, self.budget. That's an instance attribute. That's set monthly income. And we need to take some input from the user. So say income equals int input. What's your what's your monthly income? All right, so we grab income from the user. So we're not going to error check it. We'll assume they put in something sensible. And that's going to be their income. So that's option 4. So we did, 5's implemented, 4's implemented, 3 should be unaffected. We should test that out. So we have totally monthly expenses, and we have to do see cost by category percent. Okay, so we have option 4 here. Let's test out our recent changes. So let's go to our runner file, Python runner.py. Okay, let's try to add a transaction right now. So we added, again, just to review, we added a check for add transaction. What's wrong here? Okay, so we added the ability to check. Where did that go? Sorry, I got lost in my files here. Okay, yeah, so we added the check right here. So if our income is less than the amount we're about to spend, we're going to get some error here. So let's see if this works correctly. So I'm going to go to 3. Let's say we spent trying to spend $5 on some food in May. All right, we got error adding transaction. So again, we raise an error. So this is gonna, raise is another way to kind of, I guess, get out of the function. So it's kind of like a return statement, but not just a return statement. It's gonna actually return an exception from this function. So this is gonna return an exception. We go back to our interface. Luckily, we were using a try catch or try except. So when we tried to do add transaction here, this function raised an error or an exception. So that basically, it never got down to line 34 that I've highlighted here, because this function effectively failed at what it was supposed to do, and we raise an error. This except block is going to catch that error, and then we're going to print something out here. We could, if we wanted to make this a little more dynamic, the error that we raise here, we could print that out over here. I'm actually forgetting quite how to do that, so let's do a quick Google. Raise, try, accept. Google's my friends. If I use it correctly. Try, accept, raise, error string. Okay, Python documentation seems good. While true, da da da. All right, so they have their try, accept statements. Where are they raising something? Raise class. Okay, so I could raise specific errors. So again, there's built-in error types. So if this was a value error, I could raise a value error exception. In this case, I'm just raising a generic exception. So is this the way to do it? It says use this with extreme caution. All right, I'm going to abandon this, but there is a way to capture this value. I could probably throw it in some generic error. Yeah, I'm not going to waste too much time on it. But basically, whatever I raise here, I should be able to print out here. So this should be specific to the error. So for example, if this function raised like multiple errors, as in like maybe invalid value, like not enough funds, there could be several different errors that this function raises. So I should be able to capture that specific error and print it out here rather than having like a generic statement. All right, so that error handling looks like it's working correctly. Let's continue here. Let's actually set our monthly income. So if I go to 4, what's my monthly income? Let's just say it's $2,500. Now let's try spending something. So if I go to my monthly expenses, I'll go 120 on something. Let's say that was on travel, month of May. All right, transaction added. So that functionality seems to be working correctly. Pieces seem to be coming together. Again, there might be some, definitely more testing I want to do, probably write some test cases so I know that I don't break it with additional functionality, kind of omitted that whole part. Last thing I want to test or functionality I gotta check for is the percent report, where I should be able to get a report on each category for a given month. And I think there's one more error that I was thinking of. So this check, monthly cost. All right, that should be fine. We should be able to adjust our income. All right, let's kind of complete the percent report. And I think that should take care of what we want to do here. All right, so that's option 2, see costs by category for a month. I'm not sure how to title that, but I don't think too much about it. All right, one more option here. So that's option 2. I feel like the crowd's really quiet. It makes me kind of scared. What's on your guys' mind? Is this making sense, or am I kind of losing you guys?
No, it's really helpful to have like the visual aid to kind of see like the relation of each of those. I'm just kind of watching as you're plugging away. It's really helpful. Thank you.
All right. Good to hear that feedback. But again, please ask questions. I want to make sure I'm not losing anybody in the audience.
My biggest issue starting this budget problem was just kind of like it was so overwhelming to kind of like think about all the different pieces that you needed to implement. So actually being able to like see you work through it has like helped me a lot, even if I use like different logic in different portions, just the structure and the framework of it is immensely helpful.
Appreciate the feedback, but yeah, it's good to hear. Again, if there's any confusion or anything you want to discuss more, this is a great problem, kind of an abstract idea where, yeah, we're asking you to come up with all the pieces of it. So it's a great challenge. So if you did not attempt it, I would say, when you get a chance, maybe go back when you have the time to kind of see if you can implement it. Maybe you might make different design decisions. I'm not saying I made the best design decisions. Again, my enum class probably can be cleaned up a bit. I think my interface is kind of, I have a giant method here, so I probably should break this down into separate functions instead of having, a giant if statement. So this should be a function, this should be a function, this should be a function. Might kind of clean it up at the end, but just trying to get stuff to work right now. So month, and then we want to get a percent report. So what does this return? Costs. All right, so we'll have this. Again, this can be named whatever I want, so I'll keep it the same though. Self.budget.get monthly cost per category, and we can pass a month in. What else? And then we want to print this out. So we're gonna do some work here for, well, we could have this function printed out, but are we printing anything else out here? No, so it looks like, this class doesn't print anything out, it just calculates stuff, except for errors. So I think, yeah, our interface should be one that's actually handling the printing. You guys can make different decisions, but I'd rather have my budget class just do computations, not do any output. So for category and category percent cost, which is my key, I want to print out some data. So this is where I'll use my enum again. So let's do the category. Let's import that also. My final piece of puzzle, modules.category, import category. All right, and I'm going to use my enum again. Remember how we used it before? We can call the class, pass it the integer value, and it'll form the enum that way. So in this case, cat is my category, and we want to use a name off of that, and then we want to show the percentage. So that was category percent cost has the percentage. Show percent sign of all expense. All right, so I'm just printing out each category is going to show a listing of the percentage that was calculated. Hopefully that should total up to 100, assuming we don't have miscellaneous categories or transaction categories that we use. Okay, I think that's all I need. Let's verify that by running this. Runner, we need to set our monthly expense. So let's try to do that right now. We'll try to add a transaction of $120, category 3 or 2. We get an error. Again, that error is because we don't have enough money for the month because our monthly income right now is 0. So let's actually set that. So monthly income will be, let's make it 100 right now. And then let's try to add a transaction. So enter amount spent. We're gonna, let's say you spend $75 on something. Category will be 2, where that is month of May. All right, so we added a transaction. Looks like that I got added successfully. Let me bring this up. Next up, let's try to add another transaction. So let's say we spent $50 on living expense, month of May. Notice we get an error because our monthly income we set to 100. Our first one went through of 75 because that's under our budget. But now we're trying to add another $50 on top, and that's going to take us over that 100. So it looks like we need to, let's say we misentered our income. Our income's actually 1,000. So let's see if we could add that transaction now. So it was still $50. Category was 1, month of May. All right, looks like that worked. Again, not the easiest to read here. I apologize. We should probably highlight that in a better way, but transaction got added. All right, so we had 2 entries. Let's add a couple more so that we could see percentage cost. So select option, add another transaction, amount spent. Let's do $200, whatever category 4 is. I forget what that is, month of May. And let's do another amount, let's say $30. Oh, let's do $100, category 4, month of May. And I'm gonna do one more. Let's say we spent $20 in category 1, month of May. All right, let's try to print this out. And up to number 2, enter month of May, and we get an error. That's not good. Transaction amount, key error. So it looks like our category is probably invalid here. Category costs. Okay, so we're trying to do this, but it looks like this value doesn't exist. So the categories we added seem not to exist. Why would that be? Key error 2. So value 2 does not exist. Why would that be?
Would it be worthwhile to have the category costs cat when you generate that, like print out to see what is actually going into there for keys?
Yep, definitely a good way to debug quickly. So instead of doing my usual debugger routine, I think this will just be faster for us. Fortunately, I'm going to have to add all those category costs again. Really wish I had an easier way to do that, but let's print that out, see what's up. Let's add one more print statement here. I apologize, it's going to take forever. 120, I can't do this, can I? Because I need it income. All right, let's quickly try to do the percent cost. Month of 4, right? Yep, month 4. Key error 4. So what do we get printed out here? Looks like these are enum values and not actually integer values. I see. Interesting. So how do we remedy this? Let's do cat.value. I think that should work. All right, so basically what's going on is where I'm iterating over a category, it's actually giving me the actual enum object, not just, it's not giving me an integer value, sorry. Yeah, it's not giving me this value, which is what I thought I was getting. Because here I'm setting living equal to 1. So I thought if I'm getting living, that's going to translate to 1. But no, it's actually the actual enum object, which contains a value and a name. So that was my mistake. So now I'm using cat.value, which is going to convert it back to an integer. So I just want to use integers so I don't have to keep converting to enums. Hopefully that's all I need to do. Python runner, do this quickly, monthly income, something, add transaction, 120, add category 404, so add another transaction, 100, 2, 4, 2, 4. Okay, finally got some output here. It looks like these are amounts and not the percentages. That's my bad. This was our debugging stuff, so I should remove that. But yep, it's printing out the enum values. So we added 120 and 500. So I don't know what the quick math is. So 120 out of 620. The percentage should have been around 19%. So it looks like we screwed something up because our percentages were the actual values. So that should be easy to repair. But otherwise, it looks like our output looks pretty good. Again, the values are incorrect, but we get each category. It looks like it's totaling it up in proper buckets. So let's quickly fix our math error. If anyone can catch it quickly.
Could you just calculate it based on math.floor by importing math?
I don't think it's a rounding issue. It looks like it's just like if we looked at our output again, I spent $500 on food, and I used that as my percent. So it looks like I'm not calculating percent correctly here. Category cost should return the total. Yeah, not sure why this would be wrong, but
would it technically be because it's still like, so it, when you ran that that calculation on Google, it was like what 0.19 something something something.
Yep.
Would it still technically, even though you're timesing it by 100, it would still convert it to a float technically, wouldn't it? Because it still has other values past that 0.19.
Yeah, yeah, I don't think it's a rounding issue because again, these numbers match exactly. So again, 500 and 120 was what I entered in terms of the dollar amount. So it seems like I'm just not converting to percent properly, and not sure why looking at this. But yeah, I don't want to waste too much time debugging. Hopefully you guys kind of get the idea what I was going for with the percent cost. I'm just going to stare at this for a couple more minutes, but otherwise we should move on. Category cost is being returned from here. This is adding the transaction based on the month and the category. All right, I'm gonna give this one try. If I fail, I don't think we should spend too much time on it. Income, 1,000, transaction, it's simple, 100, 4, 4, 200, 2, 4. Okay, let's see what our output was. All right, so these are still off. These are all off. All right, there's something wrong with my code. I'm not going to waste your guys' time debugging it. So it looks like my categories 1 through 3, 4, 5, they all have zeros. So it looks like whatever is being done in my function up here, get month cost per category, this is not being appropriately updated. Any chance that month is not correct? No, that's a number. Yeah, I assume it's some enum issue, like
Yeah,
transaction.
probably line 35.
Right here?
Yeah, I'm guessing you have to represent the enum somehow.
Yeah, again, there might be some value issue. I think transaction at month, I hopefully saved it as an integer. This should be integer. Something's going wrong here. I don't want to waste your time with it. So I think we spent enough time on this challenge. Hopefully you guys kind of get the idea of how, it's generally good to break apart again into individual components, think about everything that you need. Enum was definitely a new concept here. So I know usually we don't try to introduce new concepts with our coding challenge reviews, but I think this is very useful. So if you guys, kind of get extra time to convert your strings to enums, I would highly recommend it just because again, strings are kind of fragile and easy to, have typos and they're, you can't really control what the user can input versus here, like these are set categories so that, it would take a little more effort to kind of mess that up in terms of if someone tries to add a new category manually. Obviously, a developer can add categories while the code's running, but yeah. Okay, any questions before we take a well-deserved break and then dive into our topic for today?
My question is, how did you do that on the fly from your head, besides having years of experience?
Again, it was really, I felt like it was chaotic from my end because I was obviously trying to think about all the components, but kind of I just broke it down as I did in front of you guys. Like I took the requirements and I just added those as comments and kind of checked them off one by one. So like I looked at the first requirement. It looks like there's a category, categories we're going to be dealing with. So instead of using strings, I decided to create a class for that. This, which is a simple function on our budget class. But kind of just piecing everything together. Again, just having a concept in my head and then trying to translate that to code. I guess that's probably some of the experience. But again, the whole goal of these design challenges is to understand what objects you need to represent from the real world in your application. And then you just convert that, into classes. So transactions, again, that kind of makes sense as an individual object. We could totally get away without doing this, but it will make our lives kind of harder. Because we're using transactions here where we create an object that kind of bundles all three of these items together so that we can use those values off transaction, like in add transaction. We go to that quickly. Notice we can use the amount and we can use the month just from that transaction. They don't have to be separate pieces that can kind of get out of sync or whatever. But yeah, again, with more practice, as with anything, you guys will get better with it. So if this was challenging for you, if you guys felt like, hey, I have no idea where to start or what to create, again, it's more practice, more repetition with anything, whether it be coding or playing basketball or whatever. You'll get better with it the more you do it. Okay, so I know that was a long recap. We spent, I think, almost 2 hours on it, but hopefully it was worthwhile. With that, let's take an 11-minute break. I think a longer break will be good. So let's get back at 10:45, and then we'll go over today's topic, which will be call stack and recursion introduction. All right, see you guys in a few moments.